When I stepped out of the cab in Brooklyn, I didn't know it, but I was about to meet Glenda the Good. You know, the witch who pranced through enchanted poppy fields in the north of Oz and get a pair of ruby slippers. Her real name was Val Gente, and she was raised on the island of Haiti, not with a litter of prune-faced munchkins. Val fused the ancient skills of the ritual drummer with the tools of the DJ in the digital age. She was a sorcerous shamanic talent with a gift for speaking to both the living and the dead. I was impressed, but I also realized this was just the first step on my long journey. It was initiation, my ruby moment.
You have to cue me because I can go on and on.
This space is totally energized. I mean, I have experienced that in certain other circumstances, but I've only noticed energy like this, like walking into very old churches. I mean, it's electric. It's like very electric, very calming. And of course, there's a whole thing about like art, spirituality, religion, magic.
If you put your hands close to a speaker, while there's some heavy bass, you're gonna feel something in your hands. That's frequency. That's the physical manifestation of frequency, right? 'Cause there's some energy coming out of there that you can't see, but you feel it in your hands, sort of thing, right? So frequencies coming from the Haitian culture, you know, Haitian voodoo culture, we're dealing with specific, you know, rhythm patterns, specific chants. So it's already kind of pre-coded. And certain songs you don't sing after 3 p.m. on Thursdays. You just don't, you know, and everyone knows not to sing it because there's a frequency in that song that you don't want to manifest. So pretty much the sound manifests in physical reality. So the sound that I'm creating in here is also what you're feeling. So when you walk into the church or the temple, because the frequency is still there, there's a remnants of it that's in the space, and it stays there, you know. You can't really get rid of it, you know. It becomes part of the fabric of that space.
This is a house I grew up in. It sits on a patch of overly taxed landfill in Hamden, Connecticut. I've sailed to South and Central America. I've lived in Los Angeles, New York, and Montreal. Finally, I settled in Berlin. After 10 amazing years in that city of ravens, a place I felt was my natural home, Hamden was the last place I ever imagined I would end up in life. I'd rather fight flesh-eating zombies in an isolated pocket of Pennsylvania. My name is Darius James. If you're familiar with me at all, it's because I published 2 books, Negrophobia and That's Blaxploitation, Roots of the Badass Tude, back in the 90s. I came back to this house in January of 2007. My time in Berlin had come to an abrupt end. My father had died. He was 81 years old. All that remained of my father was his mass collection in a cardboard box filled with ashes. I have not touched either since my return. My childhood home had become a mausoleum. I live in this house with my younger sister, Jerry. She is the sweetest person I know, and she is the only reason why I'm still here. In an early stage of my search, I went to an exhibition at the Caribbean Cultural Center in Manhattan titled Standing with Papa Legba, Voodoo at the Crossroads. It was an unusual look at Haitian spiritual traditions through the lens of contemporary art. That's where I met its young curator, Chantrell Lewis. Chantrell reminds me of a young Muhammad Ali. She has the distinct lines and grace of a dancer and the mind of a boxer. I wanted to know more about her. I had a feeling she was more than professionally involved with the themes of her exhibition. So a few weeks later, I dropped by at her home in Brooklyn.
Welcome to mi casa.
Yeah.
So I practice Lokomi, which is a derivative of Yoruba spirituality, and a basic part of that is the understanding of the role that ancestors play in your existence and the way you move about the world on a daily basis. So your, ancestors walk with you. They're not just off somewhere in this random kingdom, but they protect you every single day. And so you'll see, basic altars. You might see glasses of water, and again, each glass representing a different group of ancestors.
What days do you actually acknowledge your ancestors?
Well, I mean, this is like a daily practice. You know, I try to acknowledge them on a daily basis. But, you know, I generally try to refresh my altar with the glasses of water on Sundays. I mean, and maybe that has something to do with my Catholic upbringing, the Christian upbringing. But that's a day where I kind of, you know, I'm starting my week off. So I like to do that on a Sunday.
No, I understand that. It's kind of interesting, too, because there's a wall in my home surrounded by masks and things, which is my family, you know, the paternal side of my family. And although my father insisted that he wasn't, you know, influenced by voodoo at all, you know, everything that I've discovered since moving back in the house seems to contradict that. On another visit to New York, I happened to be invited to spend the afternoon in the home of Danny Simmons. Danny is a worldly and unpretentious man who is much more than the sum of his parts. Painter, writer, art collector, and, together with his brother Russell, producer of HBO's Def Poetry Jam. He's a system of refuge and support for a broad artistic and intellectual community in New York and beyond. Thinking about my father, this is an extraordinary collection. You know, my father, you know, collects masks from like all over, and he's got some good pieces. But when I've tried to talk with him about it in the past in terms of spiritual powers of Africa, he was kind of blind to that. He was looking at it purely
from aesthetic reasons.
That's what he was telling me. You know what I'm saying? Which kind of led to this project that there are these African influences in people's lives that they don't want to acknowledge. And I'm, you know, obviously, you know, based on what I know about you, you recognize those powers and you respect them.
Well, yeah. You know, we've been taught, and people have been taught, especially generations prior to ours, have been taught that anything associated with Africa was bad. You know, unless it was an aesthetic thing. You know, you can relate to the aesthetic of a mask, or you can relate to the aesthetic of fabric, or this, that, and the other. But the actual culture, the actual people, that was eschewed. I mean, you can go to any museum and you can see African masks. They don't concentrate. They call it art, and it's not really art. You know, these are ritual items and objects that people use for points of power and for points of spiritual reference. They don't talk about that, and it's eschewed. Anything that's non-Christian in this society is looked at. But, you know, you can look at the same object as a European and say, oh, this is a great mask. Let me put some wax on it and shine it up and, you know, put it next to a Picasso or something. But, you know, if you start talking about it as in its natural setting, as a religious object, people get upset. And that's what we were taught.
You're 100% right. They're afraid.
Of course,
They're afraid because they really don't know. But if we look a little deeper, we'll see what the truth is in there.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
People have walked in here and looked at this stuff and turned around and walked out.
Mm-hmm.
People who talk a lot of black stuff, they say, oh, no, man, I can't be in the room with that stuff.
No, it doesn't work that way. Here is the absence of faith.
Yes.
To begin with, you know? And the more we look at what we have here, but from Africa, the more we look and get to understand and let some of it be revealed to you, then you'll really see how fortunate you are.
And you see where your power lies.
Absolutely.
Your power lies in your history. For me, I started collecting African art. Well, my father taught black history, so and he didn't necessarily teach African history, but African American history. And so, you know, but when I started painting, and years and years ago, and I started looking at the European masters, immediately I was attracted to Picasso and his Cubist stuff, not knowing at the time that he had been referencing African art or African objects to create these paintings and to create this stuff. And as I'm a self-taught artist, and as I looked deeper, I started looking to where did he get this from? And where did all these Europeans who were considered masters getting this stuff from? And so I moved beyond that and started looking at things that were closer, like this painting here by Wilfredo Lamb, the Afro-Cuban painter. The way he painted it, it has deeper spiritual meaning than what Picasso put out there. Picasso put figures out there. Wilfredo Lamb tapped into spirits and Santeria and all those things. And I had a natural affinity for that beyond the surface to the actual spiritual of what an object is.
You mentioned the Cubans.
Yeah.
Okay. The Cubans, they were able to maintain a lot of their African heritage. My godfather in my religion, I am a Palomayombo. Where did he come from? Cuba. And what he bought came from Africa. I felt when I walked into this house, I said, oh man, I'm amongst my people.
That's how I feel.
That's how I feel. I'm amongst my people. So, I'm glad we're now, some of us are looking a little deeper.
Together with my friend Kaneen, I went to join our ancestors occupying Wall Street. They weren't pounding drums in Zuccotti Park, though. They took their movement underground, camping out in silent protest underneath Lower Broadway since the 1690s. Kaneen is a dedicated New York City public school teacher, actress, and Zora Neale Hurston scholar. Talking to her is like staring into the high beams of a speeding, oncoming car.
Where dreams are made of.
Do you know much about the African burial ground?
Ironically, I do and I don't and I do.
Okay.
But it was like breaking news, because they were busy building some building. That was the goal. Some financial building, whatever building they were trying to build. And, they just had to go, dig up the ground. And in that process of building the foundation, this became breaking news, like, we can't just build the foundation on these graves. And so it really started to come out. This is like 95, I think, or 96.
Yeah, I think it was 95.
Yeah. And it was 95, so I was in 5th grade. Yeah. And they were like, whoa, shoot, we can't just build on this land. And the whole notion of the fact that these are slaves, this isn't just just any random grave, but these are the slaves that actually built New York City. They literally built this city, and they were buried underneath rock and granite. And the whole notion of you can't erase it. And it's funny because, even now, me as a social studies teacher, I taught 5th grade social studies 2 years ago, and I had to prepare them for a 5th grade state test, so it's like, all this stuff about New York history, they need to know. As 5th grade, they should know, the difference between rural, suburban, and urban. They need to know about the Niagara Falls and the new trade routes that were developed and beaver pellets, and all. They need to know these things. And I usually feel like I don't like teaching American history because it's all wars. It's all the glorification of war. War of 1812, French and Indian, it's just war. And I'm like, and it never talks about the people. It never talks about the real stories about people and the rebellion and the revolution. And so, they gave me this book, and it was like this thick, just to prep them for the test, because the test is in November, school starts in September. And they had maybe 2 paragraphs on slavery in this entire book. There's stuff on the Constitution they have to learn. There's stuff on the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, legislative branch, the branches of government. There's all this stuff, the Industrial Revolution, all this stuff that these little 5th graders need to know.
Well, which is interesting because knowing about slavery would put everything else into perspective.
It would, because the whole capitalistic structure of New York City and all of America, and New York City was the hub of capitalism at that time, and still is, was all based on all of the slave labor, like the whole notion of Wall Street, a Bank of New York. They all either insured slaves, invested in slaves, the East India Company, West India Company, all these companies that we do or do not know, we do or do not recognize. A lot of them, Lehman Brothers, all these companies that are like, whoa, on Wall Street today. Not all of them, obviously, but there's some of them that really do still have a legacy and wouldn't be the companies that they were if they weren't investing in slave labor from way back in the day.
the burial ground is at the heart of American capitalism.
Exactly.
Which was an interesting thing, because as I was going through the rotunda here,
Yes.
they had a symbol for Legba.
Yes, the crossroads. Yes.
Yeah, the crossroads.
Yes.
Which told me that the crossroads wasn't about deciding what direction you were going to take, what fated decision you were going to make, but rather it was about contradiction. Which is probably the reason why Legba is considered a trickster.
Exactly, and I love Legba. I mean, Legba is Bugs Bunny, you know?
Yeah.
That whole notion of what is reality, and I can shift it based on perception and what you are beholden to as reality, you know?
Yeah.
And that's existentialism. That can become nihilism. I mean, or denial. You know what I'm saying? Because what is reality? You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, New York would not be New York without the backs of slaves. Just like in the book by Zora Neale Hurston about Moses, the whole story starts off with the fact that these slaves in Egypt, you know, all of this labor is on our back, and we can't do anything about it. We learn nothing but sorrow. You know, that's if nothing else, that's the lasting legacy that this leader, this pharaoh, wants to sit there and impart to us. You mean nothing other than your labor. And so, great, you see these beautiful temples, great, you see these beautiful pyramids, great. But that lasting legacy of the blood, the sweat, and the tears is still in everything that we see. And ironically, that's the path that we must choose. You know what I'm saying? And the path that a lot of history books choose is in one direction, which is, erase that. It doesn't matter. Again, nihilism, denial of the truth. And I was literally sitting there looking at this book, you know, under the pressure of preparing, you know, fifth graders who 70% of them could not read on the fifth grade level. This is in 2008, okay? So if you can't read on a fifth grade level, you really can't read. and I have 2 months to prepare these kids. And I'm looking at the history again, and I'm really thinking to myself, like, wait a minute. Maybe did slavery not happen? And so I had to go back and find other books and other resources and, you know, and teach that whole portion of history.
It's interesting because you talked about lines. In the middle of Manhattan's financial district is a sacred space. It seems to exist as if some mysterious circumstance of history has joined forces with all the world's religions, including voodoo, to confront the very powers of mammon that Wall Street represents. And I find, even here, we all must ask Legba for his permission to pass through the gates. And lines.
And I think it's beautiful the way that they designed this entire burial ground in terms of it does actually reference a lot of the Sankofa symbols. But this is a monument to give these people some form of a voice.
The thing that I'm thinking about, past and present coexist.
Yes.
Past, present.
They're parallel.
Yeah.
And then at sometimes when you ask questions, they can become perpendicular. And that's the power. That's the power of asking questions. Why? How?
Yeah.
Where? Who? And then they also notice it's raining.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that.
I kind of like the image. I like the image. My father never really understood why I preferred living abroad. I once wrote him a letter and explained the reasons why I vowed I would never live again in the United States. His only reply was that he didn't understand. For me, why was simple. This place had nothing for me. Or at least that's what I thought until I was struck by a cold realization. I was wrong. There was something, maybe something unique. One of the reasons I started this journey was to find out what that something is. Outside of a couple of trips to New Orleans, this is my first visit to the Deep South. We whirled past the manicured lawns of Greenwood's middle class, literally crossing the tracks over into Baptist Town.
That's Young and Pelican. That's what he would play every Saturday morning. And Honey Boy said, when Robert Johnson come out and play.
As we arrived, we were greeted by an unexpected surprise. Pastor MacArthur McKinley, Baptist Town's gold-toothed and jerry-curled reverend in a Stacey Adams suit. Homeboy knew he was clean. I shook his hand and asked, "Where can I get me a suit like that?" "Are you a married man, son?" he asked. "No, why?" "Well, that's good, because if you were married and you wore a suit like mine, it would only lead you into temptation," he said, gold tooth glittering in the Mississippi sun.
As you notice, I just read a scripture where Jesus promised that he would go and prepare a place for us. And I'm going to do at this time, Sweet Home. It's a beautiful home.
Yes.
Sweet home, sweet home, Lord, I know, Lord, I wonder, will I ever get home? Sweet home, it's a beautiful home. Sweet home, Lord, I know, Lord, I wonder.
I'm feeling really ambivalent for a lot of reasons. I'm not in New York. I'm among solid church-going folks who pay taxes to God and have barbecues after service. But the Deep South is also hoodoo country, where two heads lay tricks, sprinkle goofer dust, and work mojos. And this is stuff people don't talk about openly here unless they're telling tales about the one-eyed man deep in the woods making gree-gree bags or singing about it in songs by Robert Johnson. To them, asking the kind of questions I ask, I'm just talking about the devil, period.
Before I go.
Right here, right now, we're in Baptist Town. I mean, Baptist Town is like a safe haven for the blues singer like Robert Johnson, Honey Boy Edward, Guitar Slim. All those guys would live in this area. They would live in this area so they wouldn't go to the cotton field and go to work. Because they lived up across the river over there, the boss man would make sure they'd be at work. But they lived over here and they could hide out in the houses and wouldn't go to work. And that's what guys like Robert Johnson, Honey Boy Edward, those guys would do, because they could make more money playing music on the corner than they could picking up chopping cotton.
Okay, all right.
Robert Johnson would have been 100 years old today, and Greenwood was throwing the party. But I really honestly didn't understand who or what was being celebrated. If what Mr. Hoover said was true, how was it that a man who played the blues was being celebrated in a cotton museum? So I thought I'd go talk with Steve Levere. Steve is a big presence in Greenwood's blues community, and he plays an even bigger part keeping the legacy of Robert Johnson alive.
Greenwood is the world's first long staple cotton market, and it moved to Memphis about 1900. So things don't move too quickly in the Delta, as you know. Things have a tendency to maintain and retain and be retained. And so that's what that's all about. But as far as who owns Robert Johnson is concerned, which I think was one of the early posits that you set forth in your question, Robert Johnson and what is considered country blues, and really I think that's just a small portion of all indigenous American music, jazz, American black gospel, white gospel. It all has its roots in two primary cultures that the world has produced, the European culture and the African culture, and they came together on this continent.
Okay, I understand that aspect of the story, but that, from what I understand, there's this whole generation of like British musicians who had discovered blues, American blues, and which was discarded, I think, by and large, but they had picked it up and created this whole sensation in rock music in the 60s and 70s.
When the British musicians who were looking for songs to play, rather than write their own, why write your own when there's a guy like Robert Johnson who's written a great song that we could do? Let's do Dust My Broom. Let's do Sweet Home Chicago. Let's do Come On in My Kitchen.
Right.
And so they got their energy behind that and sold it back to America.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I can see that, actually. I heard a tape. It was an acoustic tape that Keith Richards had done covering Robert Johnson songs. And that's when I began to have respect for Keith Richards, knowing that he was a serious student of the music.
Well, he said so on numbers of occasions. Yeah.
We headed out here at the site where Robert Johnson's buried. Let's go, it's right out here. See, most of the people do not have tombstones like that's, a lot of them early 1900s. And you can see some of them was handmade.
Yeah.
And a lot of them just was made with just wood, just a cross made out of wood, and they just stuck it in the ground. And Robert Johnson, he died right across this field over here, because he followed a girl home that night. He followed Touch Hog's daughter home that night. When we be in these cotton fields, picking and chopping cotton all the way down to where you see them trees are, you would hear music coming from here. Somebody would say, "You hear that singing? You hear that singing?" You would hear sound coming from this graveyard.
Legend has it Robert Johnson went down to the crossroads and gave the devil his guitar and a fried chicken sandwich. The devil tuned the guitar and ate the sandwich, saying, "But your soul would taste a hell of a lot better, yum yum." So Robert Johnson shrugged his shoulders and handed over his soul. The devil gave him back his guitar and belched. Robert Johnson went on to impress a lot of folks with his singing and playing during his short life.
Within African American culture, I think people are leaving out a missing part of it in terms of understanding where this whole notion of Robert Johnson going to the crossroads to sell his soul to the devil, that's sort of a Christian perspective. But in African American culture, we don't all buy into that, because we know that there's a larger culture related to that, such as understanding the African perspective of that, as that eventually came down to African American culture as well. And that was understanding the trickster or the God figure Legba that was part of African culture. And Legba himself was not the devil. That's too strong of a term. But Legba was really a trickster that some people can call on.
You said that people should begin to acknowledge that these African presences in our lives, you know, that this is something that the culture at large has ignored. The reason why, of course, is that there's a lot of misinformation regarding African spiritual practices in this country.
It is a motive. We have no proof of any of this. But I think it's worth exploring in terms of understanding, as some would call it, this voodoo kind of mystique around Robert Johnson.
There's a black sun rising underneath the water. There's a black sun rising under the bounding man. Set in motion by the greed of Midas and the arrogance of Cain. A dark ritual of Moloch, straight from Bohemian Grove. The cremation of dull care, and the city they could not hold. Fire on the water, fire in the air, and below the black sun burning with an evil glare. There's the black sun rising underneath the water. There's a black sun rising under the bounding main.
The thing that always impressed me about New Orleans, the thing I really dug, was that it's the city that gave the rest of the United States its flavor, its spice. It's a city renowned for its celebration of life through its food, music, dance, and sex. It was the city in America that wasn't afraid of the body. It was the one place in America that didn't outlaw the drum and permitted black people to dance.
There's a black sun rising.
New Orleans is Europe bathing with Africa in the waters of the Caribbean. And no, I am not a spiritual tourist here. I'm not searching for a path to enlightenment by gawking at the Hindus of India or the Buddhists of Japan or Tibet. I am an American in an American city. I'm not looking outside of my culture. I am traveling along a tributary, searching for a central spring that nourishes America in a spiritual way.
Jesus Christ. Fucking hot. Ms. Glassman.
Hey,
How are you?
good.
You traded wonderful New England spring-like weather for this heat, humidity.
Of my mind.
Yes, well, you established that a long time ago. Anyway, I need a chair.
I know you need a chair, and all the chairs are covered in boxes because I'm moving the shop. Here's a chair. And I'll sit on the box of salt.
Okay.
That way I'm cleansing myself as we speak.
Indeed. Ions.
Yes, there you go. So what's happening? What you doing?
Seriously.
Mm-hmm. Last time you were here, we were initiating people in my temple in the miserable, unbearable heat, and Edgar, my papa from Haiti, was here.
Yes.
And you were making recordings of him, and nobody was speaking each other's language, but everybody understood everything.
Yeah, that's true. That I wanted to get to that a little late,
Okay.
a bit later. Because actually, since that time, a couple of questions occurred to me. Given the horrific nature of the natural disasters that hit two of the major voodoo centers in the West, I don't understand how one can
You look fabulous. Happy Easter. Okay, natural disasters.
in the face of two horrific disasters of monstrous proportions that some might say are acts of God.
Mm-hmm.
How do you retain your faith in a religion that's disparaged
Mm-hmm.
by the society we live in?
Okay, I have so many things to say about this.
I'm sure you did.
I'll try to be succinct. First of all, when I hear disasters of monstrous proportions, and then I think these are at least natural. These are Mother Earth rising up, and when I think about the proportion of the disaster that was slavery, and that was the supposed founding of this country, and the discovery again of the New World, I think at least there is something aligned, and that Haiti, like New Orleans, has somehow become the conscience keeper for the Western world, and the violence that was done upon humanity at those times. And in the same way that people will say to me that possession trance is this terrifying demonic thing, and I think instead that it's exactly the opposite. Our ego identities having such control and such a lock hold on us is really scary, and that possession trance, where you get to go beyond those boundaries and become spirit for a while. So I see things always at askew, and I've always been that way. I mean, from the time I was first born, I see things backwards. I do things backwards, and New Orleans is very much that way. Everything's backwards and upside down. Haiti, everything's backwards and upside down. When I was initiating myself in Haiti, all through the initiation, which went on for a week, Ungans, priests, and Mambos, priestesses, would come into the chamber that I was in, and they would all say, "Don't think this is going to make your life any easier. It's not. If anything, it's going to make it harder, because you're basically upside down and backwards compared to the rest of the world. And you know, so what? You have entree into the invisible. It's going to make it hard for you in the physical, mundane, material world. Don't think it's going to make anything easier for you. But what it does do is tells you at what level and to what degree you can engage in your own life and your own experience. And how we respond to spirit is whether we're going to survive this or not. So I don't think that Haiti or New Orleans is unique. I don't think we're being punished by anybody. Voodoo is not about judging good and bad. So that whole premise that, you know, this is some great evil that God is going to punish doesn't make any sense in the context of Voodoo. But what does matter is balance and consciously creating a balance in your life, in your well-being, in your community, and in how you address spirit. And no wonder all these amazing people are collecting in New Orleans and creating a front line and preserving what is unique.
You talk about going beneath the surface, the waters of the invisible.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean when you say that?
In the Vodou worldview, we could say, and actually the way I perceive and always have perceived, there is a surface level in the world that's the physical, that's the visible. And there is also simultaneously within, beyond, throughout, around all of the physical, there is an invisible ocean of spirit. And by spirit, I mean basically intelligent energy. And this intelligent energy, to me, radiates from the presence of the divine. And spirit is in everything. It is literally the water that we bathe in and the earth that we walk upon and the air that we breathe, and the entire world is ensouled with spirit and is contained within God's life force. And these two worlds interact and interpenetrate each other. They reveal things about one another and they affect one another. And we can say that the visible world is influenced by the invisible world in ways that are invisible. So we think of them as magic. They appear to us on the physical side of things as magic. To me, they're just mirror images, that the physical world is a mirror of the invisible world. And so we can act in ways in the physical that will affect the invisible world too. And we can open the doors between those two realms and invite them to dance.
L'aigle qui garde la porte. L'aigle qui garde la porte. Au tambour, de l'eau à l'eau dans le haché.
I didn't really understand the deeper meanings of friendship until I met Sally. We met in high school. She had recently lost her mother. I had lost my own the year before. It's a loss I've never really recovered from either. It remains the most painful experience of my life. The world fell from beneath my feet and I tumbled into an infinite darkness. Sally was the one person then who understood those feelings. We formed a bond of empathetic intensity.
En faisant ceci, nous touchons Guinée. La famille de ma mère, la famille de mon père, touche Guinée. Nous dansons ici, et en Guinée on danse.
Haché.
À quoi?
À quoi?
Haché.
Shabadusi.
When you're dancing in a ceremony and the drums are beating and there's lots of vibration and frequency happening, every color you see, every gesture that there is, every song, every beat is focusing the mind in a particular way and accentuating a particular vibration, a particular frequency. And it allows ordinary, everyday people in the ordinary, everyday world to suddenly break through that ordinary world into this realm of spirit and become spirit.
It's interesting you described spirit as like intelligent energy, as opposed to these personified forces of nature.
Through our interaction with them, we start to perceive beyond our own boundaries. And what happens in possession trance is not that you're being shut out or shut down and being taken over by some force out there. Instead, you're just going past what you think of as your limitations.
What goes on here is my family's from South Louisiana, and I didn't grow up here, but I've been here a lot, and I've been here 7 years living, and I'm really interested in African spirituality as it's really practical, actually. And historically, what I found is that it works. And that's why the French lost their colonies, because they thought it was entertainment, but it was really working.
Yeah.
So I come here to take part in African spirituality and connect with my ancestors directly. And it's really nice because I go to another church, which is a Catholic church, and the people on the walls, on the murals, they don't look like me. They look like somebody else. And some of them look like my great-grandmother, but they don't look like me. You know, so when I come here, I see representations of spirit that look like me, and that it's easier to connect with.
The ceremony was generous in more than one way. It gave me the gift of a new friend in the person of Hassan Sekou Allen, a charming man with an incredible breadth of knowledge concerning New Orleans' complex history and its ongoing parade of surprises. He is very much an ambassador of New Orleans magic, even if he is actually from LA.
I'm really interested in knowing how the voodoo that bloomed here in New Orleans contributed to the evolution of the different musical genres that came out of the city. Can you give me some insight?
Okay, well, you know that fundamentally African music is a rhythmic music. It's polyrhythmic, whereas European music, we always speak of polyphonic music. In other words, there's more than one phonic going on at a time. Well, here there's more than one rhythm going on at a time, and this polyrhythmic democracy, this democracy of rhythm, is something that's intrinsic to not only African ritualistic music, but also social music. And these rhythms being brought across, really fundamental to what becomes every strain of popular music down to today. The rhythm of, for example, the bambula rhythm. Okay, well, you can hear that all the way down to the washboard players on Royal Street this afternoon, or the lady that we met at Sally Ann's place on Sunday also, for a minute, tapped into that rhythm, just naturally, never having drummed before. She played that bambula rhythm. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And then there are other fundamental rhythms, like what we call the key in percussion, in Afro-Yoruba percussion, is the clave. So it's a rhythmic pattern, which I learned there's two ways: haircut, shave, shampoo, and shave, haircut, shampoo, depending on the determination of the phrase. Okay, well, that rhythm, we know, it travels through many, many different variations. Bizet's habanera from Carmen is one variation of it. Or the second line beat of the famous New Orleans, bum, 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 bum. That is also one variation of that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That is important aspect of the music.
I remember reading about this man who would go through New Orleans neighborhood and sharpen like knives, things like that, who apparently carried the same rhythms as the vegetable sellers or the Iceman.
Right. But even down to the second line marches, you go to our Mardi Gras parades, there are 47 crews that roll. Most of them use high school, junior high school, and elementary school bands from the area. And one of the big things is that these bands have to have a drum cadence that is distinctly their own. And if you don't hear bits of Africa and Haiti and Brazil through all of that, in Cuba, you aren't listening, because it's out there and it's happening on the streets every day in this city.
society. I've known David Goat Carson since my boho days in a now-vanished New York. David is a novelist and songwriter. He studied with blues legend Skip James and shares a Grammy with musical collaborator Dr. John. It wasn't until after he left New York for New Orleans, however, I learned he was a respected shaman of the White Buffalo tribe.
And you can see this is the most sacred spot for me. This is the oldest tree in New Orleans. This tree's obviously over 1,000 years old, which means it was a baby when the Crusaders marched into Jerusalem. And you'll see the roots are as big as the trunk of trees. And every time I have something to do that's I feel life-changing, this is where I come to pray. But look at this. Talking about a comfortable chair.
I was actually interested in how Native American practice merged with African spirituality. That's been a repeating theme in many of the people I've talked to, you know, on this trip.
Well, here's the story as it come to me. When they moved the slaves here, when they moved the Africans, their gods became like them. Powerful gods like Legba would suddenly be a cripple, a drunkard, living in rags. What happened is that when they came here, you know, two peoples had very similar understanding of the earth, the relationship with the planet, the relationship with trees, everything. And they were both being oppressed by the same guy. So they came together, and they did this in the hills and mountains of Haiti. The natives there that Columbus hadn't killed had run off to the mountains. And so the Africans, to do their religion, because, you know, it was devil worship according to the Catholics that were around them, they had to go off in the woods. And when they was in the woods, they run to the Native Americans. And they got together, they began to powwow. Powwow originally meant healing ceremony. That's what powwow means. And they came together, and from this merging, all the Petra, the fire ceremonies in Voodoo, New Orleans Voodoo, Haitian Voodoo, came about through this blend, which is where the Mardi Gras Indian tradition comes from, you know. And I think it's very telling that the Mardi Gras Indians use the Indian, because they had to have somebody who was going to fight the gods of Europe. And so they started talking to the Indians, and the Indians fell in love with the black people. They thought, ooh, they are pretty. You know, totally different view. You know, white folks, God, they're ugly and stupid, look like monkeys. You know, but to the Indians, it's like, oh, beautiful, oh, fearless, oh, powerful, you know. There was no problem falling in love.
Right.
None at all. And the thing that they had to consider, because the Indians had no slavery. You know, if your slave married an Indian woman, that Indian woman was not your slave, nor were the children. Yeah. They would live on your plantation, and they would help the husband, but they would have their own garden, and they would eventually buy their husband's freedom. And this is where you get the whole thing of free people of color. You know, that's like one of the big New Orleans things. It's one of the few places in the South where there were free people of color. It was the only place in the South where the Africans were allowed to drum, because they were afraid of the African drum because it was too much like the Native American drum. And are they talking to the Indians? What are they saying? You know? Yeah. And they would freak out. I'm in my Easter Sunday best.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that.
my brother, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
My brother.
Oh, my brother. How things going?
Things are going.
Hey, guess what? Me and the said we got a date this evening. We got a date, yeah.
for the opening of
Treme?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What time that'll be on? About what? 9:30.
Something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's been so long. Oh, they said my episode was on last Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got royalties from the first Treme episode I shot.
Oh, they're getting the song, your song?
That Revelators coming.
Revelate? Yeah.
You heard that, right?
Yeah.
I gave you a copy of that.
Yeah, I got a copy of that, Revelator.
John the Revelator, Nostradamus and me.
Yeah.
We were given a peek into the future, you see.
Yeah.
And what we saw, words can't explain. No, so we just sending pictures from the astral plane, visions and riddles you could make it.
It's hot. All I can think about is air conditioning and the end of the Civil War, and how the newly freed needed to celebrate. So they picked up the brass instruments discarded in the streets by the military's departing marching bands. A new music evolved out of the ashes of slavery and war. This new music was called a lot of things, but eventually it was called jazz. Jazz is played for all occasions in New Orleans, including funerals, especially funerals.
I'm just glad to see everybody out here because I always knew my father was an icon right here in the city. And from the likes of Jimi Hendrix, you can name it. If you want to go on YouTube, look at it. It's all there about my father, you know. And my brothers right here, I'm glad to see them because, you know, hey, we all, you know, with our father legacy, we glad to share it with everybody right here, especially this week of Jazz Festival.
The technical name is a traditional funeral, and it comes in two sections, the first line and the second line. And the second line is the part that most people are familiar with. But you need a first line to have a funeral, and in the first line you have the deceased, the grand marshal, the band, and some very close members of the family, and the person who will release the spirit. And once the casket or the urn, whatever, if you're cremating, is placed inside the vault, it is the responsibility and the honor of this spouse, partner, child, husband, whoever's the closest to the deceased, to take their index finger and make a gesture just like this. And when they do that, they have cut through an imaginary tether which has bound that soul to earth. When that occurs, generally those people fall out, because it's so intense. But once this gesture is made, that's when the high stepping, baton twirling, umbrella spinning, dancing takes place, and that's the second line.
The living cuts the tether. The spirit breaks free, and so too the music breaks, reaffirming life, reaffirming freedom. but it's still too hot. I love the city, but after 2 weeks, I'm ready for cooler climes. I was first introduced to the work of Ishmael Reed by one of my creative writing instructors in high school. Mr. Reed has remained an influence in my life ever since. Slightly more than 10 years later, while trying to establish my own voice as a writer, I found myself part of a group of writers and other artists on the Lower East Side of Manhattan who had descended from the Umbra Workshop, an arts collective Mr. Reed had been involved with in the very early 60s. During Mr. Reed's frequent visits to New York, I was able to establish a growing friendship with him. What I love most about Mr. Reed is his absolutely grotesque yet incisive sense of humor. For example, we were discussing Basquiat's fate at the hands of Andy Warhol. It was like Renfield's encounter with Count Dracula, he said. In the end, Warhol had him eating flies.
We've been on the road for quite a few weeks. Mm-hmm. We've absorbed a lot, and you know, I realize I'm just scratching the surface of my subject.
I think that's the essential element, is that it's a process that can absorb. Unlike Protestantism, where you're either with them or you're not with them. So I think that's if you just want a summary, an abstract of African religion, you could say there's something that's always able to incorporate new ideas, incorporate religions that are hostile to it, like Christianity. Now, I went to a funeral at the Church of God in Christ. This is a church of 19th century church, began, and they keep the African tradition going. Like, they got the drums, they got the whole thing. I mean, the middle class people, the strivers, bourgeois African Americans look down upon that. In the situation that we're in this hemisphere, our religion has always had to be one step ahead of the law. Our culture has always had to be one step ahead of the law. It's always have to improvise. And so improvisation is something that we have used as a tool.
The spiritual force was able to incorporate elements from other religions and practices.
If you look at Haitian art, I saw a show in Paris and I saw a show in New York where people use scraps. They use scraps to assemble these collages, which is what I do in my work. I mean, my work is not influenced by other writings as much as by the collage, because these are people I knew in New York. The painters were doing collages, and the musicians were doing collages, in the sense that if you listen to John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and all of them, they take bits and snatches from popular tunes. You know what I mean? Yeah. They were mixing and sampling before these kids had these machines and everything.
The blues players were doing that also.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we had to improvise in order to stay alive.
When we talk about reclaiming a African-based religion and how that religion has informed the identities of a lot of Afrocentricists, for example. And what I find interesting is that the idea of identity becomes meaningless in the face of a genuine voodoo experience.
You need an interpretation of religion that's modern, that doesn't involve a lot of paraphernalia. I got SU up there, but doesn't involve a lot of paraphernalia and ritual, and I don't consider myself a follower of any religion. All these saints require gifts.
Sustenance.
Yeah. So I think the mind is like that, and what one does is to feed the mind, and that is my interpretation of it. I just don't feel that a religion can answer complex questions about the universe.
The mind is the house of the spirit, unencumbered by trappings of ritual and dogma. This is the last thought Ishmael Reed had left me with. I ponder this as I leave Oakland to explore how this view might play itself out in contemporary art. With his gifts of sewing and dance combined with a sharp eye for found objects, visual artist Nick Cave has made a unique contribution to American culture. Clearly influenced by the religious customs and ritual traditions of West African masquerade. So we spent a day looking at your exhibition in Seattle, and what I'd like to know is how you made the transition from fabric to movement. You know, you went to art school, but you also had this interest in dance, and you managed to somehow find a way to combine the two. What was that process, that growth process?
Well, you know, I went to art school to study art, and at the same time studied dance. So I was really had these dual majors at the same time, and was interested in at some point, this collaboration of these two disciplines. I can look at it as a sculptural object, but then I also can't think about it as something that can be brought to the body. And then how does the body inform that object? May it be through performance, may it be through photography, may it be through collaborations.
I read an interesting story about how you came upon the twig sound suit.
Mm-hmm.
You were going through a period of questioning yourself, or more importantly, questioning the idea of what it meant to be a black male in this society around the time of the Rodney King beating.
Well, that whole incident was very emotional, and particularly for me as a black male, and to think about the role of racial profiling. What I was responding to was just the readings, and, just how they brought description to his character. Larger than life, worked out with prison weights. Took 6 men to bring him down, scary, and just trying to visualize what that looked like as an image. And then, created this suit in response to that, looking at materials that were discarded, view less than, and then realized that I was really I saw it as a sculpture. I didn't even think that I could physically put this thing on, and then I put it on. Then I was thinking, am I making a second skin, a suit of armor, something to protect my spirit. And then I started to think about, that and the role of persona and hidden identity and the fact that the sound suits, they hide gender, race, class. And so you're forced to reckon with something without judgment. It made me think about myself as an artist differently, that there's something more behind this than I realized.
My exploits may have taught me a few things, but the Hoodoo Road is still a lonely place. So it was good to be back in New York with my gumbo of friends, who, by the way, were celebrating my return by preparing a pot of gumbo.
Just because you're real don't mean you got something to say. Do we have enough celery and everything together? Huh?
Who first taught you how to do gumbo?
My mother.
Mm-hmm. And she learned it from?
A book.
My friend Liano from Mississippi. So basically, about a year ago, I called all of them and I asked for their gumbo recipes, and then I mixed them. I mixed them all together. So like we're using her roux and her trinity. But like the sautéing of the shells comes from a friend in Mississippi, and the use of okra is a staple of my aunt and my cousins. I think Ingrid, yours parts off in that you use fish heads in your stuff.
I use fish heads, shrimp shells, and vegetables from the Trinity. And I cook it overnight.
But okay, so the folklore, right? Well, not even the folklore. Actually, when I went to Togo several years ago, I wanted to get okra stew, right? Because in Ghana, okra stew is like a really important dish that I love, right? But obviously, Ghana is Anglophone and Togo is Francophone. So I was having a hard time. No one knew what I meant when I said okra. I'm like okra, like okra stew, and they were like, oh, gumbo. So I said gumbo en français. So I found out then that the word for gumbo, the word for okra in Francophone West Africa, Dahomey region, is gumbo. And that basically that's how gumbo became gumbo in the Louisiana basin, in that area. Because the principal ingredient was okra stew.
Yeah, but then there was the Native American influence with the sassafras.
Right.
That's what I came.
Yeah.
And I was just curious. The reason why I brought that up, I was just curious if the two of you had the okra gumbo fillet.
Well, Ingrid and
argument.
Ingrid and I completely we just have an argument about how to make gumbo, because I actually did ask, I'm using partially her recipe, but then she's like, well, I don't make it like that. And I'm like, what's gumbo without okra?
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of people.
But gumbo is okra.
No, I understand that, but there's a lot, not to deny traditions, where there's a lot of people who eat gumbo without okra, and that's okay.
Gumbo is okra. It wouldn't be called gumbo if it didn't have okra in it.
But there's still I think other kinds of. There's lots of kinds of gumbo, and I want to honor that.
Different.
I do.
Would you like to weigh in on this discussion?
We always use okra.
I think the idea of gumbo, the metaphor, is that it's a stew that combines a lot of different elements, a lot of different cultural elements, and blends them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and your technique can be drawn from a lot of different regions. I mean, I think that's the point
Yeah.
of gumbo.
What I understand is that, okra wasn't native to this area.
Yeah.
And it was brought over in the hair of the enslaved women. That's the folklore.
Was
it would be interesting to really research
Do
it.
the research, yeah, of course.
I ain't planned on this dinner party. I just want to get something to eat.
Well, why didn't you just put that in this?
Because it was too hot to handle.
You can handle it, can't you?
Yeah. Part of the story is that the Irish were in natural service in this country. Oh yeah.
Call me and tell me what you think of the magazine.
Yes, baby.
Okay.
I'll see you on Facebook or something.
Look
for me somewhere else.
Free. That's why you gotta make me that mixtape with the free song.
Oh yeah, I got you.
Bye-bye.
I know I've only scratched the surface of what I've been looking for, but the one thing I learned standing among the tombs of New Orleans is that the spirits of the dead must be set free to do their work in order for the living to continue their own. It's no wonder my home feels like a mausoleum. I know now what I must do. Glenda looms large, drizzling a rain of stardust. I can hear the beat of her electronic drum. I click my ruby heels.
Hey, my man, give me that old cat who was cooking up that jive, selling to these folks around town, making them have them funny dreams. Well, they got him, that's right. Somebody done hoodoo the hoodoo man. Old Joe Hatter from Louisiana, hoodoo king in every manner. But I found out without a doubt, the tables have turned on him. He ain't got a tooth in his head. Old Joe is almost dead. Somebody done hoodoo the hoodoo man. 10, double 10, 45, 15. Joe can't drink no gin. And nothing goes over the devil's hat that don't buckle under his chin. His face just like gravel sand, and everybody's got Joe on the pan. Somebody done hoodoo the hoodoo man. Shabba-dabba-doo-boo, rap, shabba-dabba-doo-dee-doo-bee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-dee, ba-doo-dee-doo-doo, da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-ba-doo-doo-doo, shabba-dabba-doo-bee-doo-doo. Somebody done cooked up some stuff in a pot, not too cold and not too hot. Put a few drops in Joe's beef stew. Now he's on his top, he don't know what to do. He don't know who did it, he can't find out. He don't know who's last to do. Now he's down. Somebody